it's Michelle, and I have been playing with my Cuttlebug, and I just wanted to come on and show you guys a little bit about what I've learned with it so far. I don't really have a particular project that I'm going to be doing today. I'm just going to be kind of playing around, showing you some of the things that it can do and what I've figured out about it so far, which is not everything, I'm sure, so you guys may know more than I do when it comes to the Cuttlebug. And if you've got any tips that you want to leave for me in the comments, I'd appreciate that too. I'm just getting started with my Cuttlebug, but I am loving it. So I'm going to turn it around and open that up, and we can get started. I had ordered some cutting dies and I was waiting on those to arrive. I have received several of those now, so I'm ready to play around a little bit and get started. Let me straighten that up a little bit for you guys and kind of get it into the middle of the frame for you. Hopefully you all can see what I'm doing here. Okay, so the Cuttlebug is for cutting, embossing, and probably so much more that I have not yet figured out. But we're going to get started. And with my Cuttlebug, I received the rubber embossing mat, and we'll get to that a little later on. I'll just lay that aside. And I had an A plate, which is very thick, as you can see. And from what I've come to learn, this is just to add thickness so that this can be removed if you're using one of the older dies that are much thicker. And otherwise, if you're using the thin ones that are more common today, as you can see, they are very, very thin, then you put this in there to take up that extra thickness, because we're just going to add pressure, and it presses that die into the paper and causes it to make that cut for us. And the key is in just making the right Cuttlebug sandwich to get the pressure that you need for that. So also with my Cuttlebug, besides the A plate and the embossing plate, or embossing mat, I guess I should say, I received 2 B plates. One that still looks pretty good, and one that is etched like crazy from all the cutting that I've been doing. So what I decided to do was to always put that on the bottom and do my cutting against that, so that I really just get those etching marks on one and don't ruin the other. And as you can see, it kind of started to bow my plate a little bit because I was putting all of my dies in the middle and all of my etchings were happening in one spot, and it was kind of starting to bulge a little bit and create a bow. So I started putting dies evenly all over it to kind of even out that pressure. And actually, as those cut marks kind of cause a little bit of expansion in the plate, I found that it does add a little bit of pressure with the thickness, and it's been cutting better the more that I've done with it. So to create your Cuttlebug sandwich, I will tell you that I saw this little sort of memory trick on Maymay Made It. And I really love watching her channel, and I really love this little memory trick. I love memory tricks anyway to help me remember things. And, you know, like I said, the A plate is to be removed if you're using a die that has that thickness. If not, then you put in the plate for the thickness. So in most cases you will be using that, because most of the dies today are the thin ones. So you have the A and then a B as the start of almost all of your sandwiches. And then you will place your paper on your sandwich and the die for the cut that you're going to be making. And then what comes next depends on what you're wanting to do, if you're wanting to cut or emboss. And the trick that I learned from Maymay's channel was If you want to emboss, then you use another B plate because of the strong B in the word emboss. And if you want to cut, then you'll be using the C plate for cut. And I really like that little memory trick, and it helps me every time. So the C plate is a little thicker. So let me show you guys that. You can see the difference in the thickness of those. So the cutting plate, the C plate, is a little thicker to apply more pressure so that it cuts completely through your paper. And the C plate was purchased separately. With my Cuttlebug, I received the embossing mat, the A, and 2 B's. So I think there are some on the market that do include a C as well now, but be sure and check that if you want to do cutting with yours. If it doesn't come with it, you may have to buy the C plate separately. So then we've just got all of that sandwiched together, and we can turn our handle and crank it through. And before I even take that back out, I want to tell you guys that sometimes I have found that it doesn't always cut through every time. And I think a lot of that is because I am using very thin cardstock as far as cardstocks go. I don't really have a lot of the heavier, good cardstocks available where I live. So I may have to seek some of those out online or something. So what I've been doing is I'll kind of look at that and see. That actually may have cut all the way through, I'm not sure. But knowing how that works on pressure applied, a tighter sandwich will squeeze it completely through. What I have been doing when I have a thinner cardstock that I'm trying to cut is I will put 1, maybe 2 pieces of cardstock in between the A and the B, just to tighten things up a little bit. You don't want to get it too thick, so much so that it won't go through. But I found that a sheet or 2 really helps it go through. And then I can take that out. Now you probably would not have to do that if you had a heavy cardstock to start with, but we're just adding a little bit of pressure. And there is my die cut. It is so intricate, and I just love this. And that would be good as a frame, or maybe just something to put a sentiment on. I really love that. And another thing that I don't have yet is a die release tool, but I don't think I'm really going to find one because I've been using a quilling needle tool, and all you really need to do is just to kind of poke through those holes in the back to get those little scrap pieces out. And that way they're not stuck in the die, and it'll help those release. And a lot of times if your main image here doesn't want to come out, you can push from these little circle holes from behind, and it'll push that out for you to help it release. And one thing that I really like about the Cuttlebug is I'm not really limited to just cardstock. You can cut other materials. So I'm going to start my sandwich with my A and my B. And we're going to try to cut a different material. Let's see. A piece of fun foam. And we'll put a snowflake die down on that. And our C plate. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and put one sheet of my cardstock underneath that B plate just to make sure we've got enough pressure. But like I said, be careful that you don't add too much pressure. You don't want to cause it to crack anything. And I just love the fun foam shapes. That is so pretty. You can take your little die release tool if you have one, or a quilling needle tool, whatever you've got, and just poke those out. I just love that. I think that is so pretty. So that is our cardstock and fun foam, and I have seen the Cuttlebug used to cut the stiff felt, and I think that would be great. I don't have any of the stiff felt, so I couldn't try that, and I couldn't even find any of that in the store around here, so I'll try to get some of that and give it a try and let you guys know how it goes with that. I did try it with regular felt, and I couldn't get that to cut very well, so when I do get some stiff felt, I'll be sure to give that a try and let you guys know how it goes. So the next thing we're going to do is embossing, and these are embossing folders. This one just has the design in black, but what's actually going on is it has the shape of the image raised on one side and recessed on the other, and the raised pushes the paper into the recessed and just embosses that shape into your cardstock, and it looks really good. This one came with the Cuttlebug, and I like it. It's a sort of quilted look of a pattern, and I ordered this one on eBay, and that was just sort of a no-name brand that I got from a Chinese seller. And then I got this, it was the Doris brand, in a sort of honeycomb pattern. Now the Cuttlebug and the no name are smaller, and if you are doing an A2 size card, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 once that's folded, then this will fit that perfectly, because you'll have a matted layer on top of that that should be about 4 by 5 1/4, and that will fit perfectly. So even the no name brand is a good size for that. But I like the Doris because it's a little bit bigger, as you can see, and you could do so much more with that. You could overlap and make sure that it extends beyond the edges, or do a larger card. You could probably even do a 5 by 7 with that. So let's see, 5 by 7 exactly. So if you want to get the Doris brand, I think they're better because they're a little larger, and they're also even cheaper than the Cuttlebug brand. So we're going to try one of those. We're going to lay the C plate aside. We will be using the A, B, and then our paper inside of our embossing folder. Just open that up and put your paper inside. You can line it up with the pattern the way you want, or you can scoot it all the way up and kind of press it into that crease at the top. And then lay that on and put your other B plate and crank that through. And when you open that up, your paper now has that embossed image, and you can use it on the raised side or on the recessed side. Both are beautiful, so you can get either look that you want with that. So let's try that one more time. This time I'm going to do the snowflakes, and we'll do it on a colored cardstock so maybe y'all can see a little bit better. So we got A, B, and then I'm going to place my cardstock inside of my embossing folder. Rather than going up to the edge, I'm just going to line it up myself this time, the way I want it in there. And just be careful not to let it shift after you get it where you want it. And lay that down and put on our other B for embossing. And crank that through. And that is so pretty. I like that. I do see that it did cause a little bit of cracking where the embossing was, and I've heard other crafters say that that is because you need a heavier cardstock, so that's another thing that I will consider in trying to find some. And there's the debossed side where it's an indentation rather than a raised image. And I really like that. So I will tell you guys another trick that I have seen done with the Cuttlebug. And although I have not had success with it yet, I want to show you guys anyway, because it, I think, is also due to not having good heavy cardstock that I've not been able to have success with that just yet. And that is to emboss using dies. And the way that we do that is to use the rubber embossing mat so that when the die, when pressure is applied to the die, the rubber mat underneath will kind of give a little, allowing it to just press like the embossing folders do rather than cutting all the way through. And I have had cracking and even cutting through with mine, but I think it is because I need a heavier cardstock. So we're going to try and see what we get. So we're going to put our A plate and a B plate, and then we're going to use our rubber embossing mat, and I think the thickness of that replaces the thickness of our embossing folder itself. Since we're not using an embossing folder, we're going to try to do it with dies. And if this is unsuccessful, it's most likely due to the fact that I have a thin cardstock and I do need some heavy cardstock. And then I'm going to place my die on there, little set of Christmas bells, and another B plate because we are embossing. Now, like I said, I have had cracking and even cutting, and a sturdier cardstock may hold up better. We'll see what we get. Just going to crank it through one time. And that popping at the end sounds like it's cracking, but that's just when all of the plates make their way through and the pressure is released. It always does that. So, and I can see this did not work the way that it should. But you can see that it didn't cut all the way through. We just had some cracking due to sort of my flimsy paper. But as you can see, if you had good paper, you can use that debossed side or turn it over and use the embossed side, and you can emboss your image onto your card that way. And there is just so much that you can do with this Cuttlebug. I'm really, really loving it, and I can't wait to do even more. And another trick that I have learned for placement, let's see, A plate, B plate. When you're wanting to cut an image, say you were wanting to use your die to not create a cutout shape, but to create a cutout window, and you want to use the negative space in the card, you can do that too. And a trick that I've seen some other crafters do is to tape your die exactly where you want to make your cut. That way it won't shift around on you. You can get it perfectly placed the way that you want it, and that won't move on you, so that you can keep that where you want it to make your negative space or your window or whatever you're doing. And they do make a magnetic plate for this that you can put under here, so that when you place your die on there, it's magnetized in place and won't move. But I haven't got one of those yet, so in the meantime I'm using this little tape trick, and I've actually found that pretty handy in the learning process anyway, as I was feeding it through and then maybe refeeding it through if it didn't cut well, adding a layer or two of cardstock for more pressure. And as I moved around back and forth, just trial and error, as I was learning to use the Cuttlebug, I found the tape really handy for that. So then I'm just going to, nope, we need a C plate to cut, sorry about that. Put my C plate on there. And let's see, my paper's crooked. There we go. Let's see, and I didn't have my extra layers to add pressure to my thin cardstock, so good thing it was taped in place, and we can add a couple of layers and just do it again. Let's see, my extra layers, then my B plate, then my cardstock and die, and my C plate for cutting. So I'm kind of glad that happened the way it did, to show you guys how handy that tape is if you need to redo it, and if you're still learning and practicing like I am. You can peel that tape up. This looks like regular masking tape, but it is painter's tape, so it is sort of an easy release tape. And then there is our cutout, or you can use it to have the negative space in your card, however you want to do it. And I think that is really neat. Okay, and one last thing that I have learned about the Cuttlebug that I wanted to try. I actually have not tried this yet, so this will be my first time on camera. I have seen partial die cutting, and I wanted to give that a try, so I'm going to add a couple of layers. So you guys don't add too many layers and sort of mess yours up if you have a thicker cardstock, because it is not necessary. This is just to accommodate my thin cardstock. So then my B plate. I'm going to try to do partial die cutting. And I've got sort of a campfire here that I wanted to try to do. And I'm going to place that on my cardstock. And then I'm going to use my C plate. But what was the key to everywhere that I've seen this done before was to put your plate to where it only is on top of and applying pressure to the area that you want to cut. And whatever part of your die is not in between the full sandwich is not going to get all the pressure, and it's not going to cut. So I'm going to put mine stopping just before the bottom edge of the flames there, and see if we can do a partial die cut. Ooh, that shot out. Okay, so let's see if it worked. It did work. Okay, I love that. That is so great. So what happens there is, see where the bottom edge was not between our sandwich, it didn't cut. So we could create a card and just cut over to meet that so that we can release this top part here. Cut to meet it on the other side, and then you could have sort of attached to the bottom portion of your card. That is really neat. I really like the partial die cutting, and I definitely want to try to do a card with the partial die cutting. I like that. So that's about it for today's video. Thank you guys for coming along on my Cuttlebug journey with me as I'm learning, and being patient with me. And hopefully in the next video we will use the Cuttlebug to make a card or some sort of project rather than just playing like we did today. So you guys be sure to comment below, like I said before, and let me know anything that I need to know to use the Cuttlebug. Be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already. Give me a like over on my Facebook page, and be sure to join our Facebook group, Craftie Minds. Follow me on Pinterest and Instagram, and also visit my blog. I'll put the links below, so be sure and check those out. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.